Hey everyone, welcome to Off the Platform. I'm Greg and I'm joined as always by Jackson. How are you, Jackson?
Yeah, great. Thanks, bro.
Awesome. And our special guest today is Ben Pollack. How are you, Ben?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Cool. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Now, for those who are unfamiliar with Ben, Ben is the what I would say the epiphany of the ultimate powerlifter. Jacked and tan, looking fantastic, and also incredibly strong as well. So, Ben, do you still hover around the 198-pound mark? You look a lot bigger than 198.
No, I haven't been there in a couple of years.
Yeah, actually. No, I didn't want to say because Instagram, those photos can be deceiving, but you look a lot bigger than 198. But your competition history, best ever total 2039, which is a 925 kilo total. It's 198. So best squat ever, 362.5 kilos, 192.5 kilo bench, and a 370 kilo deadlift. And that was achieved, Ben, in 2017, the SPF Reebok Record Breakers. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Cool. And then the following year, you won the 198-pound class at the Kern US Open in 2018. Yep. Yeah. And then what the latest comp was the Tribute, wasn't it? Which was in 2019.
Yeah. So after, I guess my competitive peak in terms of competition results, not personal results, was 2016, 2017. Because then I started, after I got that world record at Record Breakers, I started dabbling in bodybuilding. And it took me quite a long, I'm still working on trying to figure out how to balance both at the same time. So back when I was, after the current 2018, that went okay. I had some grip issues. But after that, really had trouble balancing the two. And had to drop out of a few meets in a row due to injury. So the Tribute that you mentioned, I was going in with an adductor strain. And I was really hoping it would hold up, and then warm-ups had popped on me. And I just ended up taking token lifts there.
Okay. Yeah, because came in, I couldn't figure out third or fourth, wasn't it? Depending on, because who was it? The WRPF? Was it a WRPF comp or?
It was still USPA.
No, USPA. Yeah, they separate raw and reps, don't they? So depending on, if it was recorded as raw or reps, third or fourth behind David Eisenberg and John Hack and or Jody Blazek as well, eh?
Yes. Yeah, because I was 181 for that meet.
Cool.
The comps, I mean, this is when these comps were first sort of like coming about, which is the cool part. Like, I mean, people look at those numbers now and be like, oh, an 800 total. Like, they sort of like blasé it, if you know what I mean. Like I don't know what that is in pounds. It's like 1800 or whatever it is, but like, people will sort of like blasé it, but like at the time you were doing these numbers, these are like, you were winning these big meets. I mean, you won Boss of Bosses. Was it the 2017 US Open that you won overall light male?
Yep.
Yeah. And then you won obviously Record Breakers. Like, these are ludicrous numbers for 4 or 5 years ago. That 925 at 90, I don't know, did you watch the US Open recently?
I did, yeah.
And old Chad Penson coming through.
Yeah.
Mad
really
dog.
Impressive.
Mad dog.
Really impressive, absolutely.
I'm actually just messaging him at the moment, trying to get him on here. But I mean, you've got some massive numbers, but then I remember you saying, so obviously you're training with, what's your best squat there, like 800 pounds basically. I remember you saying that around that time you were really struggling to keep your body weight down, and you were eating some like ridiculously low amount of food to keep your body weight down.
Yeah, so in hindsight, it was pretty stupid of me, but throughout my entire competitive career up till this point, I was really focused on winning meets, not on doing the best that I could personally. So, Yuri Belkin was and still is kind of the dominant figure in the 220s, 242s, because I prefer to compete in reps. Nobody's close to him. And still, back then and now. And so I didn't want to compete against Yuri, and so I was, artificially keeping my body weight down, really hindering my performance, but I was able to win a lot of those meets just because on Wilkes, even with the drastic weight cuts, I was able to put up decent totals. So yeah, it was probably about 2.5 years. I was averaging between 1,600 and 2,000 calories a day.
Wow.
To stay in 181, 188, and then still doing 30 or 40 pound water cuts on top of that. And in hindsight, I think that was smart up until Record Breakers, and then I should have started eating more, but I put that off for a couple years because I've never seen myself as a big guy. I honestly, I was 260 this morning. I don't really enjoy being big. It's really uncomfortable. But from a performance standpoint,
Yeah.
you're going to be better eating 5,000 calories a day than 2,000 calories a day. So, yeah, from now on, I'm probably not going to try and focus on winning meets. Just try and do my best at them. And that way, that's if there's a secret, that's the secret I found of balancing bodybuilding and powerlifting at the same time.
I mean, I remember, and then so obviously you stopped competing in powerlifting. Well, for now, obviously you've got meets lined up. What's the goal? 2,300.
Yeah. So my goal right now is Stan Efferding's best total is 2,305, and that's the best powerlifting total that's ever been put up by an IFBB pro. So Stan got his pro card as a master, which is, to be honest, it's less competitive, but it's still very difficult. Same thing John Meadows did. Same thing that a lot of my current coach, Shelby Starnes, did. But my goal is to get a pro card in the open class. So I have USAs for bodybuilding. That's July 31st this year. And then, yeah, I'd like to put up over Stan's best total. So 2,306 plus. So my first powerlifting meet back since 2019 will be the Pioneer Open on September 11th. So I only have about 6 weeks between those two, but I'd just like to put up a PR total at the Pioneer and then take 2022 and build on that, because with where I'm at now, 23, I mean, at 260, you would hope added some strength. So I feel like 2,300 plus is pretty reasonable. It'll just be a matter of staying healthy and getting back in the groove of all the little nuances of things that you don't think about when you're coming from bodybuilding. So particularly deadlift grip is going to be my biggest challenge. And then I'll have to get used to squatting and wraps again and stuff like that. But the big challenge will be just staying healthy, I think.
I mean, even for your bodybuilding training, for anyone that follows you on Instagram or finds you now, you're still training the big three, very, very heavy. Everything's heavy. So, I mean, like, is that that's obviously just your style of training, or?
Yeah, I can't get excited about doing the light pump and stuff, man. It's really boring to me. The concession I've made is using more machines, but I still pick out the ones that I find have good. In fact, I think probably the most important thing I've done is found the machines that really do seem to help my power lifts. So, I feel silly saying it, but reverse band inclines in the Smith machine really helping my bench. Hack squats really helping my squat. It sounds silly, I know, but you look at some of the top bodybuilders, they're really strong, and I think that there's a lot to be said for some of that assistant stuff and really pushing it heavy. So I have found kind of a balance. There are some muscles that I've tried training heavy, and all it does is make me hurt. So for shoulders and arms, it's just super light, high volume. I suck it up and then get it done. But yeah, for the most part, I like to keep stuff pretty heavy. So hoping, we'll see. I got 700 for reps on squat tomorrow, so I'd like 8 or so.
Nice.
Dang, is that going to be in sleeves as well?
No, wraps tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm 12 weeks out of the show and 18 weeks out of the Pioneer, so I got to start getting used to them. It'll be my first rep session in a whole long time.
Wow.
But I was doing a couple. I think I worked up to 700 for pause double and sleeves before my last peak for bodybuilding. So I think 6 to 8 is probably reasonable reps.
So Ben,
pretty reasonable.
Ben, you touched on before, you said the number of the Stan Efferding's got one of the very few IFBB pros who was also an elite powerlifter. Is he's one of your like motivations or idols in terms of that movement?
Honestly, the guys that I was following coming up I'm still not into, to be honest with you, the bodybuilding physique, like what passes as good physique, that doesn't appeal to me. I'm just trying to chase it for the judges. Like I get my head around a goal, even if it's, you know, not something that resonates with me, and it's hard for me to kind of let that go. But like, I look at guys like Dan Green, Matt Kroc, Janae Kroc now, like that type of just really thick physique. Wouldn't do well on a bodybuilding stage, but man, like that, you know, they got the powerful look with the big traps and big back, and that those were always the guys that I looked up to. So, you know, for Stan, he's just, it's really hard to argue that Stan is one of the most accomplished figures in the industry. And so, you know, that's to me, it was a good goal to shoot for more than anything else. But by the time Stan was lifting, I had kind of zoned out of the scene, I guess. I was more focused on my career at the time, which is no longer my career now. So, not so much, but you know, it's really hard to let me put it this way. He's an idol now. He wasn't when I started. I had to kind of learn how impressive his accomplishments were.
Yeah. So you've your bodybuilding, you've competed in the classic division, haven't you?
Yeah, that was another terrible mistake, and I really don't have a good explanation for you. It's just I tend to make emotional decisions sometimes. They're usually not very smart ones.
I was just thinking that it can be quite challenging, for a powerlifter to compete in classic, you know, because obviously big, thick.
You know, I don't have the structure for it. I tried to tell myself I did. John Meadows was my coach at the time. He told me it wasn't a good idea, but we could do it, which, you know, I have to say in hindsight, he was 100% right. I wish I'd listened, but I'm stubborn, so I didn't. And it was miserable, man. John got me shredded, just absolutely shredded. But to make weight for that division, you know, he didn't want me to water cut, which I've learned in bodybuilding. You know, you try to stay away from water cuts if at all possible. So we just did straight fat loss down from the mid 220s to I think 184 on stage, and it was so bad, man. There was one time I was doing my cardio, which he only had me walking. You know, it was nothing crazy. He only had me walking, and I was with my fiance at the time, and I just had to sit down. I was like, no, I'm done. You got to go get the car. I thought I was gonna pass out walking around the block. So it was terrible, and I wasn't super pleased with my results, but you know, it was a learning experience. So there you go.
How do you find because the result in bodybuilding is very much different to the result in powerlifting. In powerlifting, there's most variables are under your control, whereas in bodybuilding, it's pretty much you've done the work. It's just turn up on the day, and whatever the judges want to judge you on, they'll judge you on. You know.
Yeah. So I'll be honest, and this was probably a little bit arrogant and a little bit ignorant of me, but that's exactly what I thought going into it. And in hindsight, knowing what I do now, you're right. There's definitely a level of subjectivity, and at the pro level, I imagine those subjective measures are very, very important. But at the amateur level, they're pretty objective, I got to say. And
okay.
You know, they're always going to be looking for different things. Like, so I did nationals last year, and I do think I was probably the most conditioned guy in my class. And they were looking for size, so that kind of worked against me. But on the other hand, I can go back to my performance there, and I can point out major issues in my posing, major imbalances in my physique, and overall, you know, I can't say that my placing was that far off from where it should have been. So it's just the things that they look for are so minute that if you are not really enmeshed in the sport and you're just looking at it from kind of a layman's perspective, it's almost impossible to notice. And even for me now, you know, I got to study the pictures and study the shots and really practice over and over and over again, because the nuances are, well, it's exactly like pulling sumo. If I don't know if either of you guys pull sumo, but you know how if your feet are half an inch off, that can make or break a lift, right? The bar's not even going to break the floor if you're that much off. And it can be the same for the posing. If you are missing like half an inch of external rotation, you're going to lose so much size in the appearance of your arms, so much width in your lats that you know, you've really sold yourself short. All this work you've done building this muscle and getting conditioned, and you just didn't hit that pose exactly right. So I've definitely gained a lot of respect for the guys who have put in the time just mastering that, because I find it a little bit boring, but you know, if you can embrace that, it's really cool to watch in person. The guys who can just nail it.
If the goal is the pro card, was necessarily the choice going into one of the biggest bodybuilding events in the US the right one? considering, like not choosing some, something in, Czechoslovakia, for example, with a chance?
Well,
I mean, easy win.
Yeah. From a practical standpoint, right, during COVID, not possible, right?
Yeah.
But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. The thing is, though, there's no guarantees at any show, right? So, spend a whole lot of money getting to Czechoslovakia to do a show and not necessarily win. That would really be filthy. But the other thing is, there's flip sides to it, right? So let's say that I did decide to go do a show in Czechoslovakia, saying it's going to be less competitive, which it may well be. I don't know anything about Czechoslovakian bodybuilding. There's a lot of travel involved. That's going to, do a whole lot of things to your body. You're going to have to figure out how to react to that, how to compensate for that. You're going to have to find the foods that are available there that you're able to, digest well, that you're reflect well in your body. Adapt to a different gym, a different gym scene, a different culture, language, all that type of stuff. Whole lot of increase in stress that can make or break a physique on show day. So I think that while it's definitely possible, it wouldn't be a whole lot easier, I don't think, in my opinion. Now I'm a high stress guy, so maybe some people who are more chill than I am and who speak Czechoslovakian can get away with it, but I think I would be more intimidated doing that than a national here.
I think it's incredibly tough for bodybuilders who travel internationally, isn't it? I remember watching a documentary or something with Rolly Winkler in it, and he's sitting in a hotel room with his trainer. They've got the cooker, the rice cooker. They've got all the meals pre-prepared. That lifestyle. You've got to be so dedicated to it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So Ben, what's your history in competing in sports in general? Like, take us back to the early days.
Yeah, well, I started actually lifting I wrestled in high school. I was not a good wrestler. I started at 103, and by my senior year, I was up to 112. But I did like the lifting portion of it, and I ran cross country one year, and I rode one year, and but I wasn't super athletic in high school or anything. It was really when I got into undergrad, just by chance, I happened to room with a guy who had some junior records. I want to say in the APF. I can't swear to that federation, but I think that's what it was. And so he started a little powerlifting club at our school, University of Virginia. We happened to get Elite FTS, who's one of my sponsors now. They were kind enough to send us a competition bench and I think a couple bars and stuff. So, he really taught me a whole lot about the basics. I was still too thick-headed then to listen to his training advice, but at least I got my technique down and, kind of the basics of programming down well enough that I could start lifting progressively. And I got pretty strong, but looking back in hindsight, my technique was abysmal. I really wonder had I had better technique, if I would have done better as a lifter in general. But yeah, that was kind of my start in powerlifting. Then when I started competitive lifting, actually, after I graduated, a friend taught me into doing the CrossFit Open one year.
Really?
That was my first competition.
CrossFit Open?
No.
It was fun.
That sounds hard.
But the gym that it was at, they had a strongman group that lifted on Saturdays, and I thought that was a lot more fun than doing burpees and running around miles and circles and stuff. So I started doing that, and that was way more fun for me. So I did 2 contests there. Second contest, I tore my bicep, so that was the end of that. Tore it on a tire flip. I think I partially tore it on a tire flip, and then completely tore the rest of them on a keg clean and press. But whatever. That was a pretty rough injury. So when I got back, by the time I had healed up, I had started grad school at the University of Austin for study of physical culture, and I met some lifters there who kind of got me back into powerlifting and started competing. November 2012 was my first meet.
That was the USPA meet? Was it North American multi?
No, that was USAPL. So I did USAPL from 2012 to 2015.
Okay. Yep. What was the decision, if you don't mind, from moving from USAPL to the other feds, the USPA and so forth?
I'll be honest, yeah. So at the 2015 Raw Nationals, I came in second to John Hack, and Hack kicked my ass. It was not close. But they gave me the WADA drug test and not him. And I know John wasn't taking anything. You can look at John's results now. It's clearly he wasn't taking anything, but It still pissed me off so much. I was like, man, y'all are gonna just give me this rub salt in the wound and everything. I was like, well, I just didn't care at that point. And you want to see what you can do anyway and be enhanced. So that's after that. It wasn't immediately after that. I thought about it for, I think Raw Nationals was in October, and I want to say it was like February or March or something that I started the following year. But it was right before my prep for Boss Bosses is when I started. So yeah, I was just kind of disillusioned about the drug testing part at that point. And I have a ton of respect for USAPL, IPF lifters. The organization in general, I don't think they're very lifter friendly. I didn't at the time. You can hear a lot of stories about just shady things they do, not with regard to drug testing, but just making things harder on the athletes than they should. So I don't regret that decision at all. And I find USPA meets more fun anyway.
What are your thoughts on the latest USAPL issue with the IPF, around the IPF coming down hard on drug testing?
So I've heard two things. I don't know. My gut reaction is, hey, good for the USAPL, good for standing up for yourself, despite the fact that the overarching organization is kind of making things harder for you. I have heard, and I can't say this is the case because I've only heard it from other people, not from any organizational standpoint or anything like that. But I've heard that if the USAPL doesn't comply or is too outspoken, it might then reflect poorly on the lifters who do want to go to IPF Worlds or something. I hope that's not the case, but yeah, I mean it. I want to say, what were the last two things? I know the USAPL has to pay for all its own drug testing, and I can't remember all the details, but it just seemed like other things that were going to make it a worse experience for the athletes and you have to pay a fine if you don't stay in the IPF approved hotel. Can I curse?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Dude, that's fucking bullshit. That's absolutely outrageous. You're going to have these IPF meet directors who buy out a hotel, charge extra prices for the lifters, say, hey, you can either pay me extra to stay in the hotel that I picked, which is probably a crappy hotel, or you can pay a fine to stay at the hotel you want. Get out.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
You already got to pay for your own flight and everything.
Fuck.
I can't get on board with that. It's just ridiculous.
Is that IPF or is that a USAPL rule? Or
that's IPF.
That's an IPF rule. I heard a rumor, but I wasn't too sure of the detail.
No, and they have it that you see some of the people, even the top lifters, and they say, oh, actually, I stayed at this hotel instead of the comp hotel, paid the fine, and it was still cheaper and a nicer hotel.
I bet.
And it's ridiculous, but the fine's gone up to 150 euros a night that you don't stay at there.
Hell of a lot.
That's an expensive fine, man. So how much are they tacking on the price,
and then you're paying your flight out there, you're paying your flight back, all that stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's almost
like anyone.
It's an ultimate form of monopoly, isn't it? They're trying to monopolize everything to do with the competition from start to finish.
Yeah, definitely.
100%. It's an interesting one. That's hilarious that they tested you when you got second and they didn't test first. I didn't know that. That's great.
Well, to be fair, it was me and Alex Trubisky, and we probably were more jacked than the other people there, which I'm not mad about. But
not mad about. Take the compliment.
It seemed a little bit weird to me. So.
Well, the USAPL, because I heard Larry Maley, the president, and we've talked about this on the previous podcast, but USAPL will profile you. So whereas the true WADA compliance is completely random, because they handle it, and so they just pick randomly. Whereas USAPL will go through and go, okay, he looks a bit, sus. He has big traps, or
we were just talking about this. His traps are too big. That's like their thing. They're like, we know what a steroid user looks like. Their traps are big.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was angry on the platform. It's a clear sign. Yeah.
It's hilarious, man. I feel like it should just. Why is it not just like the winner of each class? Obviously, like that should be just a given, And then
you think winners who broke records, that type of thing. But
who cares if the guy who came fifth is on gear? Like, he's obviously shit.
Yeah, right.
Who cares? It's an odd one, man.
So Ben, coming back to your academic life as well. So you mentioned that you'd studied at Virginia and you did your first degree there. Was business commerce or something like that? Yep. And that's where you started your first career, was with the big corporates.
Yep. Yeah. So I worked at At UVA, for some reason, they call their business degree commerce, which is probably some silly tradition. But so it was basically undergrad business school. So I worked for 2 years after that at Freddie Mac, which you guys might not be familiar with it. Over here, it's a government-sponsored enterprise that backs mortgages essentially for. So purchase mortgages from the bank. It's very boring. Purchase mortgages from the bank and essentially insure them. So if the buyer defaults, the bank's not liable for the whole. And the bank pays a fee to the Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae in order to kind of balance that out. But that's the long and short of it. It was extremely boring work, and I didn't like that at all. I made good money. It wasn't super stressful or anything. It was very boring and very unfulfilling. So I applied for a bunch of jobs. I randomly happened to get an interview with Google in their risk analysis division, which is what I was doing at Freddie. And so I ended up taking that job and flew out to San Francisco. So I worked there for a year, and I was like, it was working at Google was great, but it was still doing the same boring stuff. And I was kind of like, well, it's definitely not going to get better in this industry, right? Like, if I'm going to keep doing risk analysis for financial industries, financial accounts, it's just not going to get fun. So I decided to completely change gears and went back to school to get my PhD in the history of bodybuilding and powerlifting.
So you worked at Google again. I didn't know this. This is crazy. So you worked at Google. Is it as cool as they say?
Yes. So working at Google, like just being an employee at Google, is as cool as they say. Absolutely, yeah. It's very much like they portray it in the movies or on TV or whatever. I have nothing bad to say about Google except I did not like what I was like. I did not like to do what I was hired to do. But we would choose which cafe we wanted to go to based on the menu, and it's all free food, and people would bring their dogs in. I would generally get there at 8 in the morning and stay at least till 8 at night, and I wasn't working the whole time. But that's they just make the facility nice enough that you don't really want to go home or anything. So
Do they actually have nap pods?
Yes, they do. I actually use the nap pods quite a bit. It's pretty cool because they don't close all the way, but somehow they're shaped to keep most of the sound out. They're very comfortable.
Sign me up.
That is
sign me up. I tell you, yeah.
Man, so it's one of the things that's actually like the movies. How good.
Yes.
That's
ridiculous.
And then so you obviously went back. People might not know, but Ben actually has a PhD. He's actually smart, unlike the rest of us meatheads.
Well, that's questionable. Have a PhD. Let's not go further than that.
So your PhD is in the history of strength sports.
Yeah, so the actual name of the degree is Interdisciplinary Studies in Physical Culture and Sports, but it's just a fancy name. Essentially, it's the history of strength sports. Yeah,
that's awesome. So obviously you get into that as your first degree was what, like history, or was it history and exercise science?
No, it was just business. And technically, I should have had a master's in something like that, history, American studies, sport management, something related to what I was studying. I didn't.
So you went from your business degree and then carried on into the PhD?
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay.
I was lucky my advisor was able to kind of spin it so that was acceptable, but there was definitely some growing pains at first.
So tell us, take us through what it takes to get a PhD, Ben. Like, I mean, we're not talking about a short essay and in a presentation, are we?
Well, let's be real. Words. My PhD is in liberal arts. I'm sure it's much, much harder to get a PhD in the hard sciences. But essentially what you're doing is learning to do research. So for us, we had about 2 years of coursework, which was, just straight up grad school classes, which are, they're arguably more challenging than undergrad classes, but at the same time, hopefully there's stuff you're more interested in. So I wouldn't say that was a whole lot harder than undergrad. The first 2 years were really fun because essentially it was a second chance at undergrad, and kind of the best parts of undergrad because you got to do what you like. After you finish your coursework, in my program, you took it's been so long. Basically, had an exam. I can't comprehensive exam. So on the sport management side, It really sucked. Like if you wanted to go into sport management, you wanted to work for a professional organization, professional football team, something like that, you basically had to take a 3-day long test about all the material you studied over the past 2 years. So that the guys who had to do that, that was miserable. Again, mine was kind of more of a history degree. So we had a month to write a publishable article about any topic you wanted. So I wrote an article about a guy named Earl Leaderman. You guys know Charles Atlas?
Yeah.
So Earl Leaderman did basically the same things that Charles Atlas did. He sold mail order programs, just like now you can go online, you can buy John Meadows programs, you can buy Larry Wheels programs, you can buy my programs. Back then you had to buy them through the mail. And so you would basically get a correspondence course. They'd send you the intro material. You'd do the first week, you'd send them back your numbers, they'd send you the second week, et cetera, et cetera. So Earl Leaderman, I wasn't the first to do this, but he was the first to do it really, really, really well. And so he made, and this is back in the 1910s, 1920s, he made millions of dollars selling his courses.
Wow.
And this is a time where, there weren't even very many gyms then. So it was basically you were doing bodyweight stuff and he's making a fucking fortune off these. But he's kind of, nobody really knows who he is now because when the Great Depression hit, I mean, he was living large. He had like penthouse in the middle of New York City and, buying all the fancy cars. His wife left him and took like half of everything. So like, yeah, he had not financed for his future. So the Great Depression hit, he went bankrupt, and so did most of the other guys doing the same kind of thing. Charles Atlas went bankrupt at first, but he was able to find financing to keep up his business, which was really helpful because he already had the, I want to say it was like world's most beautiful man or world's most developed man or some award in terms of early bodybuilding. So he was able to keep it up, keep spending money on marketing, keep selling his courses. And so he kind of persisted throughout the 1930s. And by the time the economy rebounded, he had a monopoly over the whole thing. And so that's why now, Charles Atlas, all the ads about getting sand kicked in your face, all that sort of stuff. He didn't really invent any of it. He just was able to kind of stay through the bad times and keep selling. So that was that paper. And that took about a month to write the first draft and probably a year and a half to finish.
Wow.
So that was, that took me to about 3.5 years. And then you start writing your dissertation, which is just a long version of the comprehensive exam. And so mine was the biography of Jack LaLanne. Right after Raw Nationals in 2015, went out there, met his wife. He was deceased. He had already died by the time I got out there, but met his wife, brought back a whole bunch of material from their archives, spent probably a year going through all the different material, cataloging it, kind of figuring out what was there, putting together a piece of his story, and then the next year writing the whole thing. So 5.5 years all in, but probably the majority of it was writing. And it's not different. Like I wasn't really joking about the smart thing. I don't think you have to be necessarily smart to do something like that in terms of, like, I don't know physics or anything like that, but man, you got to be really patient and you got to be really detail oriented, and you got to be willing to make sure that you've gone through everything 100 times. You didn't miss anything, and this subject backwards, forward, sideways, inside out. So that's what I say when you're learning to do research, it's really you're learning to kind of grind through all this different material, synthesize it, and kind of put it together in a new way. And so the last 2 years, those were not fun. Those were, they were drag. It's a lot of work. Like I imagine law school would probably have the same thing. But I do think that even though I don't directly use any of that, I do think it was helpful because learning to do that stuff, you can apply that to almost anything. I definitely apply it to my programming now where, if I'm going to set up a program, I make sure to go through all the material I can find that's out there, all my personal experience, all my notes and everything, and try to synthesize that into something that's still going to work, but is also kind of a fresh take on the stuff that came before it. So that was my 6-year PhD program in a nutshell.
6 years. Did Jack's wife read it?
Yeah, she did read it. She also she wrote her own version, which was a lot more reader friendly. So again, this is history, right? So it was 500 pages of a lot of like historical context, a lot of footnotes. It's very dry. I'm not gonna lie, it's very, very dry. So hers is a lot more accessible. But she did say she liked it. She said I got everything right. She said it was fair and balanced and everything. And I got really good feedback on it eventually. It took a lot of revisions, but yeah, Elaine is the name of his wife. She's she's amazing, man. We went over there. She was 96 when we visited, and I guess that was 2016. Yeah, 2016. So 5 years ago, I would have been. I was 27, 28. I can't remember. She was 96. Swear to God, she had probably 10 times the amount of energy that I had. She
Wow.
kept going all day long, dude. She was grinding. She was going back and forth all over the state, I guess you call it, and just never stopped. I was like, Elaine, I gotta take a break. It's just incredible that the amount of energy that she had, and that you gotta imagine that Jack had as well.
Yeah, was it? Do you think that she had got that from him, or he had just emulated her, or vice versa? Or
Based on what I read, it seemed like they both kind of came about that naturally. They were both just extremely hyperactive. I don't mean that in the bad, like the ADHD sense, but like in the sense that they had just extraordinary amounts of physical energy. Because Elaine's background was very, very much athletic too, especially at a time when women didn't have much in the way of athletics. She was definitely very active and very much a go-getter in the early industry of early radio industry. Was how she got her start.
I did read when I was doing a little bit of research that he invented the Smith machine, and amongst a few
He
other
claims he invented the Smith machine. There are a lot of different claims to who invented the Smith machine.
Yeah.
The guy, it's named for a guy named Rudy Smith, who was a competitor of Jack's in the 1950s, 1960s when chain gyms started to appear. Now you can find a version of a Smith machine in Jack's home gym, but there's no firm evidence that he ever invented it before anybody else.
Fair enough.
So yeah, when it comes to the history of machines and the history of lifts, my advisor actually has a paper on this, but it's very, very hard to trace back the actual origins of these things. She's done a really good job. I think you can find a pretty good estimation of who created the first barbell. Definitely the first barbell with revolving collars, which was a pretty important innovation. And who created the first kind of like universal machine, where you have the weight stack and then the different versions. But after you get past that, it's very difficult to say, okay, who actually invented this, who, just kind of came up with it simultaneously, or who maybe saw this on a visit and then copied it and mass produced it. That stuff is very, very, very vague.
As far as the dissertation and the work you've done on the history, was there any reason you focused on, now to me that seems like very recent history. Is there anything prior to that? Like, we're talking hundreds of years ago, or is that kind of bodybuilding type physique fairly recent?
No, you're right. It's probably much more recent than most dissertations in my field. The only reason I went with that topic was because Jan, my advisor, she had been friends with Elaine's for a very long time. And right when I was starting my dissertation, Elaine reached out and was like, hey, we need to do something with this information if you want it. So it's just a very good opportunity to write about someone who is very, very influential in the field. I mean, you can look at all the awards that Jack's gotten. He's pretty much universally known as the godfather of fitness. So it's hard to find a more impactful topic to write about than that. And that's the only reason I went with it. Originally, my plan was to actually make a geographical survey of the spread of gymnasiums in North America, in the United States, which would have gone back to the 1800s when gyms were really a very esoteric thing. So you would find, and this would be, you can really actually trace the spread of gyms where almost to individuals, where it starts kind of in the Northeast, where you'll have some boxing gyms that happen to have a couple dumbbells. You can find pictures of these boxing gyms that just in the corner, they have a couple dumbbells lying around. You can kind of infer, oh, well, people clearly train with weights here, but it wasn't important enough to them to write about. We don't see a whole lot of it. And then you can actually go back in the boxing literature and see, okay, well, there was this gym up in New England, and then you can trace that to this gym in Baltimore where they talk about using dumbbells and doing calisthenics on like dip bars and stuff. And you can kind of actually trace, in some cases the individual, but just how gyms spread across the country. So it starts out in the Northeast, but it doesn't really take off. Starts out in the Northeast, and then it gradually moves over to all the way across the country, right to the West Coast. And this is when a lot of people are migrating to California for economic reasons, right? So when they migrate to California, you can see a bunch of gyms open over in California. It's not until after World War II when all these soldiers are stationed in California, go overseas to Japan, they come back, they see all these gyms in California while they're there, then they come back and disperse across the country after the war, and that's when you see gyms springing up everywhere, because all of a sudden, all these people have been exposed to the same thing in a very small geographical area. And so I was going to do a survey of that and try and really trace the origins back and make maps and stuff. And in hindsight, I think that would have been more fun for me, but it would have been, not many people are going to be that interested in that kind of thing. So it was just a better topic in that regard. With regard to the origin of actual, bodybuilding and powerlifting are more modern. So bodybuilding, you'd have to argue modern bodybuilding, the earliest you trace back to would be the 1930s. If you really, really wanted to push, you could have stand out in 1898, but that would really be more kind of like deep background than any sort of formal bodybuilding. And powerlifting, again, unless you really wanted to make a stretch and talk about lifting weights in general, you would have to say that was 1950s. So both of those give me more modern. Weightlifting, you can trace back a lot further. Odd object lifting would be tied to Olympic weightlifting, and that you can go back way, way back if you want to. You could probably make the argument as early as the 1500s, but I wouldn't want to be the one making that argument. That'd be a tough one to make.
Yeah, because powerlifting as a sport's recent, like you said, probably 1950s. But I mean, the IPF is only was 1970 or 1974, I think.
Yeah, actually, my advisor Jan was pretty influential in that break when drug testing was first starting. And you kind of got the first split between powerlifting federations.
Yeah. Oh wow.
And then now everyone's just gone their own way.
Everybody's gone their own way. Yeah.
Now there's 30. You wouldn't even count.
Oh.
The
50 in the US, I think. I heard.
Yeah. If not
50.
Then right around there. Yeah.
It's ludicrous.
What different sets of rules there? 50 sets.
What is going on? Fucking hell.
Yep.
I mean, to be fair, like we have 4 in New Zealand for like 4 million people,
and growing,
which is ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah. One for every 1,000 people. So. Yeah.
That's it. Oh, everyone's a winner. That's the point of powerlifting, isn't it?
So Ben, let's touch
nowadays.
Yeah, let's touch on your training, because so coming back to the ultimate goal for any powerlifter is to look like Dan Green. These days, to look like you now, eh? So, can you achieve both? Can you have that ultimate Olympia stage ready physique, and can you be an elite level powerlifter?
I'm gonna say so. Elite level powerlifter and pro bodybuilder, I am going to say yes, that's possible. Olympia powerlifter and Olympia bodybuilder and world record powerlifter, I think at that point, no. Nobody's done it yet, right? And so maybe somebody will. But to me, based on what I've learned so far, I don't think you can get to the very, very, very top of both sports at the same time, or even maybe not even one lifetime. Maybe if you're some guy who starts out real early, hits his world records, early 20s, and then immediately flips over to bodybuilding. But when you look at the top guys, they put their time in, and a lot of times they have to make sacrifices, whether it's going to be in terms of body composition, right? You're putting on a whole lot of lean tissue that's not really doing much to improve your strength, and it's probably jeopardizing your leverages, which is why a lot of times you'll see these super heavyweight bodybuilders who can't lift as much as you would expect on the power lifts, but they can, put up 300-pound dumbbells like it's nothing on inclines. A lot of times they're just so big, their leverages are really, really, really bad. Or the flip side, you beat your joints up so much that you then can't train productively for bodybuilding even. So the very, very highest level, I think it's pretty difficult. Now, just a notch below that, I honestly think there's a lot of complementary or a lot of overlap between the two sports based on what I've learned. And again, this is something where my Ph.D. was pretty helpful in some regards, because when you look at the training of the guys, even in Ed Cohen's era, it was pretty much bodybuilding training until they were 8-12 weeks out of meet. And in my own experience, it's a lot. If you can find the right movements for your body, it is a hell of a lot easier to get strong without getting beat up if you're training like a bodybuilder. You're just putting in so much volume, but there's not a whole lot of mental engagement that tends to wear people out, burn people out. There's not a whole lot of strain on joints that tends to cause injury. And so it's very easy to be progressive in that regard. On the flip side, having a whole lot of strength makes it really, really easy to put on tissue. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jordan Peters, trained by JP, but he talks about this, about how you build your base level of strength first. The size follows. The size comes based on that strength. The strength comes on much, much quicker. So the guys that I coach, or the guys that I see that have that strength base, they tend to gain size a lot faster than the guys who don't. So there's a whole lot of overlap there. And I'm still playing around with my own training, trying to find the perfect balance between the two.
That was my next
but
question.
I definitely think they can be more complementary than many people think.
Yeah, that was actually what's going to be my next question, is how does one find that perfect balance? What sort of cues?
So I think, and this is, I have no scientific evidence to back this up. This is all my personal experience. I think the key is frequency and building up your tolerance to frequency. Because what I found is that you have to put in the volume for bodybuilding, right? And you have to put in the intensity for powerlifting, right? If you're not training, you can see powerlifters who can rep out 400 pounds on the bench all day long, and they're like sets of 20, and then their one rep max is 500 because they don't practice that top end strength. And you can find the opposite as well. You can find powerlifters who can put up insane numbers at any weight class, go down 148, 165, 81, 98. All these guys putting up insane numbers, almost as big as almost numbers comparable to the super heavyweight guys, and yet they're so much smaller, they haven't put on this tissue, right? So to get the best of both worlds, I think you need to find the maximum frequency that you can train at, and then structure your micro and mesocycles such that you're doing some form of high intensity training that's very low volume and keeping you primed for strength, while the majority of and then also having that base about what your main goal is, so having the majority of your sessions be high volume. And the flip side. So what I'm doing now is I have 4 sessions per week that are straight bodybuilding sessions, where I'm doing, upwards of 12 to 20 sets per body part.
Wow.
And then I have 4, and those will be typically about 90 minutes. And then I'll have 4 much shorter sessions that I try to keep it to half an hour. Sometimes I'll start yabbering and push them out to 45 minutes, but I try to keep them under half an hour. And basically, I'll work up to either a single, double, or triple on one of the variations of the big lifts, and that's it. I'll just go home. And that allows me to kind of keep the groove, keep the technique on the power lifts, continue to actually improve them, but the majority of my training is still effective bodybuilding training. And I think I'm hoping I can flip that around, right after the show's over. I'll make my base sessions, the typical powerlifting training, and then I'll have those shorter sessions where I'm just focused on doing hypertrophy work, probably honestly just for the shoulders and arms and calves, because for me, those are the parts that don't grow from the bench, squat, and deadlift. So
these 2 sessions, are they on the same day, or are they separate days?
Yeah. Again, and that's one of the restrictions, is that I found that if I try to spread them out evenly throughout the week, I get halfway through the week and I am wrecked. But if I stack them on, 3 or 4 days a week, I have enough days where I'm completely off. My recovery seems to be much better. And I'm hoping over time I'm able to increase my tolerance to that frequency, where I can train 5 or 6 days a week, right, and still have these very short sessions interspersed throughout the day. I guess if you would look at the research, it would be higher frequency is more opportunities for growth, more exposure to the lifts is going to increase your, what's the word when you're good at something? Sorry.
Mastery.
Your proficiency.
Your proficiency.
Yeah. Right? More exposure to lifts, increase your proficiency of technique. So there's probably some science behind that, but I think increasing frequency, to me, much more difficult than just increasing volume, where you're just adding a set or two to your workout. So if there's a secret, I think that's it. I'm still playing around to try and nail that down, but it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, so say you're doing like your heavy, say, pressing variation. So like you said before, the reverse band on the Smith. Would you do that, say, in the morning, and then do like your chest and triceps hypertrophy stuff in the afternoon? Like, do you pair them up like that, or do you pair like a squat and then like shoulders and biceps? Like, so
the latter, yeah. So, for example, this morning, I had chest and shoulders. So I did incline dumbbell presses, reverse band incline Smith, and 3 different types of lateral raises and a shrug. So that was the morning session. That was about 90 minutes. It took about 90 minutes. Then I went back 3 hours later, and I worked up to the variation today was a 5 count pause, close grip bench, and I worked up to a single and did a back off set of 4, and that was it. So that took 30 minutes. So altogether, I was in the gym for 2 hours, which is a long time, but I mean, a lot of people are in the gym for 2 hours when they think, talk whatever. So the total training time probably pretty similar, but I find that this has been working very, very effectively, at least for the past 4 or 5 months, which is a pretty decent time for training bar.
And then do you find that, obviously, so say doing that like shoulders and stuff earlier and then doing the pressing, does that almost sort of, how do you say, like auto-regulate yourself, like limit the weight you can do on the heavy stuff so you save your joints?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think it works so well, is that, yes, my weights are dramatically, it's probably a solid 10 to 20% decrease in the weights that I'm using in the afternoon sessions, but my aches and pains are gone.
Oh,
which is awesome because I can still be progressive on those later sessions. Yeah, I'm not training at my peak weights, but I figure, okay, I'm in this fatigue state. My fatigue numbers are still going up over time. I'm pretty sure that's going to transfer over so that when I am training them fresh, I'm going to be that much stronger. And in the I've only experimented with this a handful of times, but it has been the case. So I'm pretty optimistic about it. But yeah, I definitely think that it's pre-exhaustion, right? Which has been around forever for protecting your joints, allowing you to avoid injury, but it does seem to be working.
And I suppose it then saves you doing like you've already got a pump, etc. You've already got blood flowing from the morning session, so it saves you doing all of this like 20 minutes of prehab stuff for the afternoon session.
Exactly. Much faster. Now I will say, like, if you're looking at performance enhancing drugs in the equation, bodybuilders take a hell of a lot more than powerlifters.
Sure.
I'm sure that plays a role in recovery as well. I'm trying to stay on the pretty conservative end as far as bodybuilding goes, but man, these bodybuilding cycles, I've seen some insane ones, and I believe the guys. I don't see why we would lie about how much you're doing if it's a ton. I can see going the other way, saying you're not taking much, but man, they get some aggressive stuff. So
to be fair, I've heard some pretty like ludicrous stuff from powerlifters these days as well.
Like, I've heard some of those, but I've also heard the flip side of powerlifting. I've never heard that in bodybuilding, or at least heavyweight bodybuilding.
Right. For you, when you made the switch from when you left the USAPL and basically just said fuck it, and then came into USPA untested, etc., you still maintained your body weight, so which is why you had to eat so little food. And then I remember when you came in, and in a year you put on 50 pounds of basically what seemed like straight muscle mass, like in the same condition.
I mean, it's a combination of everything, but so trying to keep my body weight down, artificially eating an extremely low number of calories. Also couldn't go very hard on the drugs. If I were to go over 500, I couldn't even get to 500 milligrams of test. So I went over 400, which is, usually considered a beginner cycle, which I don't agree with, but usually start at 400 milligrams. I went over that. I couldn't make weight. So I was very limited in how much I could kind of use and still stay in the weight class. And so, once those restrictions were all lifted, I went up to a gram test, which is too much, right? Like, let's be honest, nobody needs to be on that much unless you're competing in super heavyweight bodybuilding. And a gram of premium bond, which is a pretty heavy cycle, but at the same time, again, based on what I've heard from other bodybuilders, not that bad.
That's not much for bodybuilding now. That's kind of entry level for bodybuilding these days anyway. Higher level bodybuilding anyway. I remember Dave Palumbo saying the same thing, about a gram a test is about standard.
Yeah, and I've heard, you've heard about the guy who died.
Dallas McCarver. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he was on everything.
Yeah.
All of it.
So,
what did they test his at? They thought it was like they tested his blood when he died, and it worked out to be that he was having to have like 12 grams of test a week or some shit.
I can't even fathom doing that.
That's ludicrous.
But anyway, that combined with literally triple the calories, definitely added quite a bit of muscle size very quickly. Now, the other thing I think you got to keep in mind is that my weight naturally fluctuates a lot, right? So I was doing 50-pound water cuts for powerlifting.
Shit. 50 pounds.
So yeah, I think that I don't know what it is about my body, but it seems to go up and down very easily, even all those things aside. So yeah, I don't have a great explanation for you. I think it was kind of like a perfect storm type deal. But you can look at other guys who did similar things. So I trained with Brett Wilkin pretty recently, and he was struggling. He was a 212 pro, and he was struggling to stay in the 212s. And eventually he said, fuck it, I'm going to go open. And he put on about 40 or 50 pounds of mostly lean tissue in an off season. So I definitely think there's something to that extended caloric restriction where you're really, really trying to keep your body from growing, and then wants to rebound twice as much as it would normally.
Well, and I guess it goes to what you were saying before about building that base strength, and then you can put on more size. Like your base strength was so ludicrous that like then when you then actually feed it and start doing the required reps and volume, etc., your body is just like, let's fucking go.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Now on the flip side, getting lean for me is also pretty easy. And that one is just straight genetics. So, you know, I think that if I were able to put on more fat tissue, I think I might even be able to grow better from that. You know, have better lubricated joints, have less susceptibility to injury, probably have a better, a lower stress profile or better sleep or something like that. Because, you know, there's very few guys that stay super lean year round that seem to improve very quickly. So, I mean, that one's tough for me. I'm already eating more than I really am comfortable doing. Like, it's just kind of force feeding all the time. So it's interesting to think about how the different factors, body composition, you know, strength potential, all that stuff kind of plays a role.
Plays into each other, yeah. So you obviously, followed you for a bit. So you are coached now by Shelby Starnes.
Yeah.
I've seen you're pretty open with it. I mean, a lot of coaches don't do this, but Ben and Shelby are pretty open with like posting what Ben's eating, which is awesome. It's a lot of food, man. That's a lot of food.
It is, and I don't mind the eating so much. What I more mind is kind of the side effects of the eating. So, like the worst one for me is, and if you go back and look at the diet that Shelby posted, you'll notice that the last meal of the day is a little bit smaller than the other meals. Because if I have a lot of carbs at night, you know, you get that pump from eating all those carbs. Well, my kind of chest and throat will pump up, and then I'll feel like I'm suffocating during my sleep. You know, terrible acid reflux. Do you guys follow Antoine? I can't say his last name.
Grishka?
No, actually,
Oh, not Antoine.
Antoine
Valier.
Yeah.
He posted something recently. He's like, yeah, so when I'm dieting, I feel really good. I do my fasted yoga. I can move. I'm mobile. When I'm bulking, it's like, all right, time to put on the shoes. Let's go for sock PR. And that's exactly how it is. It's like putting on your shoes is really, really difficult. And I actually worked with a sports psychologist once. I was like, you know, I think I have some potential in bodybuilding. It's a real struggle because all these things I do to get big, it makes me feel miserable. She asked me for an example, and I told her to put on my shoes and put on my socks and shoes. And she's like,
what?
I just don't wear socks and shoes. So that's why if you see my videos, I'm barefoot most of the time. It's like, can't even take them on.
I don't think I've ever seen Brandon Allen put a pair of shoes on.
So. There you go, right?
That's like the classic, like going to the doctor and saying like, it hurts when I do this. So she's just like, well, just don't do that.
Exactly,
that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
You don't have to. Like, you mostly work from home now, and obviously the gym you go to is like pretty chill. So just don't wear socks and shoes.
Nope, there you go. So yeah, that for me, that's the hardest part. That and the discipline to put in the lighter work and that type of thing. Yeah, I know I've said in the past that bodybuilding is easy, and easy is the wrong word. Bodybuilding is very simple. I think when it comes to strength, there are all these variables that you have to consider. And if your training is not very smart, right? Your training is not designed really, really smart, you're not going to be as strong as you might be if you have perfect programming. Bodybuilding is very, very simple. It's very straightforward, but it's not easy because you got to put up with all that stuff a lot. Like it doesn't go away. It doesn't, you know, it's just constantly hanging over your head. So yeah, it's definitely not easy.
Yeah, bodybuilding's clock watching half the time, going, when's my next meal?
Yes, it really is. That's a great example. Great example.
So when you say bodybuilding simple, do you just mean like basically
the
more training, more food, more training, more food? That's basically the way.
Eat, sleep, train.
Way forward. And then the last 2 weeks or so before a show, that's when it gets complicated. You got to make sure, you know, all your macronutrients, all your micronutrients, all your training is absolutely perfect. But the rest of the time, it just doesn't matter that much. And that's why you hire a coach to do that. Coach has done it a million different times with a million different people. So.
Yeah, I find with bodybuilding anyway, those last few weeks, you can start to second guess yourself if you're on your own.
Oh, yeah.
Am I doing the right thing? Well, I don't look as good today as I did yesterday. And you need that coach to say, stick to the plan, relax, stick to the plan, just follow, do as I say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of...
Sorry, guys, I'm going to be back in 2 seconds.
Oh, Greg's got prior commitments.
I need to go for a leak.
So, Ben, in terms of, obviously you have like physique-wise on Instagram, it's ludicrous. How tall are you?
5'8".
5'8", and so you weigh 260, which is that's like in kilos. That's like 117, 118. I mean, that's a big dude, especially how lean you are. So you would, how you said your next comp is only 6 weeks before the powerlifting comp.
Yep.
I mean, do you think the fact that you are pre-lean year round will help? Like, because obviously some people lose a lot of strength going into a bodybuilding show and it takes them forever to get it back. Do you think the fact that you train lean year round could sort of help?
Yes, I hope that it will. No guarantees, and that's why my goal for the meet is only the PR. Which if I can't PR 60 pounds heavier, there's a problem. But right,
yeah.
I had the benefit. I got to practice last year with my show. So last year we kept the heavy stuff in all the way to the end, and it wasn't until the last 2 weeks that I really dropped off in strength.
Yeah.
So our plan this time is to keep the heavy stuff in until 4 weeks out. At 4 weeks out, we're going to drop the heavy stuff, but we're going to increase the volume. So we're going to basically, instead of doing like, if I have 700 for reps tomorrow, instead we'll say, okay, we're going to cap it at 500, but you can take your reps real high, right? So the risk of injury is lower, but at the same time, you're at least still maintaining your strength. And then that'll be kind of the hypertrophy block, which will lead into the 6 weeks after, when hopefully what I'll be able to do is put on a whole lot of water weight after the show, 10, 15 pounds of water weight, so that I'll at least somewhat mitigate that risk of injury, and then also improve my leverages, at least on the squat and bench, enough to perform really well. What's going to be trickiest for me, I think, is finding that sweet spot in leverages where my strength, my squat, and my bench are really strong, but I can still get in the position on deadlift. Because right now I have trouble dropping my hips enough to really get enough quad engagement off the floor. That's what I'm working on right now.
And especially in terms of, like, say, putting water weight back on too quickly, that your hands don't get swollen, et cetera, et cetera. Because I mean, I've had that happen at meets where I've cut like hard, had to hold it because I've missed weight, and then I've bulked back up, and it's all just gone to my hands,
Yes.
And you're dropping deadlifts that you've pulled in the gym numerous times.
So frustrating. Shelby is very, very meticulous, so I'm confident that he'll be able to help me do that correctly.
Nice. Do you think that's something that a lot of powerlifters could benefit from, is having a nutrition? I mean, everyone these days has a coach, and everyone these days is a coach in terms of powerlifting. But do you think people could benefit from a nutrition coach or nutritional guidance?
It's so hard for me to say because obviously I'm biased, right? I like paying attention to my nutrition, and I think for me it plays a huge role in my performance. But it's really hard for me to look at a guy like John Hack or Yuri Belkin or a woman like Hunter Henderson and say, oh yeah, you would be better if you did X, Y, Z. Although actually Hunter does work with the top bodybuilding coach. She works with Matt Jansen, so I take that one back.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to say that these guys would, improve on how great they are already if they were to only change something, right? Like that's kind of, you think they're probably doing everything perfect as is. So I don't have a great answer for you, but I do feel personally it helps me a lot. And I'm, you look at Matt Jansen, who's Hunter's coach or diet coach, and he's done the same thing with a lot of strength athletes. He helped Larry Wheels when Larry was going to break Lily's record, the 308 record. And he helped, I want to say, Thor at one point. So he definitely has experience with strength athletes, guys like, who was Brian Shaw's diet coach. He was really big. Whose name, I want to say Nathan Payton, but I don't want to get it wrong.
Oh, yeah,
so
Brian Shaw's coach.
Yeah, that go all in on it and seem to benefit from it. So it's strange to me that you wouldn't see everybody doing that, but you can look at a lot of top guys who don't. So it's hard to say. I talked to Dan Green once. He was literally. I asked him about his off-season diet, and he just laughed. It's basically a seafood diet. So where it's like seafood, eat it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
His favorite tagline is "No skinny champions,"
Yep.
which he's it's true. I mean, even like you said, like when you were under 82, under 90s, so under 181 and 198, I mean, I don't think anyone would have called you skinny. You were like a jacked, 80 or 90 kilos.
Yeah. Definitely had to stay lean to be in that class.
So you were saying before, I wanted to touch on it because I was amazed. So what's the biggest water cut you've done for those comps?
The
50
biggest
pounds.
water cut, I think it was 47 pounds or 46 pounds. It was 227 at the beginning of the week to 181 at the end of the week.
That was in a week.
In a week, yeah. To be fair, 227 was last thing at night, and 181 was first thing in the morning. But yeah, it was pretty miserable. I actually ended up performing pretty okay. I missed my last deadlift, but otherwise the meet went really well. But oh man, I felt so bad, and that was the only time I didn't rehydrate with an IV, and that was a terrible idea, terrible mistake. So yeah, I remember after my third squat, I had to lie down because my heart was beating so fast. I felt like I was going to throw up.
Sure.
And by the time deadlifts rolled around, I felt better, but I was just so out of energy by that point that I ended up kind of blowing them. Well, not blowing them, but underperforming.
Was that a planned choice to not use the IV, or was that just a lack of didn't have one?
No, it was just stupidity. So or lack of experience rather. So I had used an IV once before and didn't think it made much of a difference, but that wasn't nearly as big of a water cut.
Yeah.
And I don't like IVs. Like the idea of like needles is okay. Needles in the veins is kind of like I don't like blood.
They draw a line.
Yeah.
Yeah, needles in the butt's
so,
one thing, but
yeah, I was like, well, I don't need it, and I needed it for that degree of a water cut. If I'm cutting, like maybe 10, 15 pounds, then I think I can rehydrate fine without it. But once you're getting up to the 30, 40 pounds, it's a huge difference. So
yeah, I mean 47 pounds. I mean, so for our kilo listeners, 47 pounds. So a 45-pound plate is a 20 kilo plate. So he's cut 21 and a half kilos.
that's a shit ton of water.
In 6 days? That is insane.
Yeah, and I remember being like very cocky about it. I was like, this is gonna be easy. And it was like the night before, not the night before, but it was like the night, I guess it was the Wednesday night. So I would cut on, no, it would have been Thursday night, really push hard Friday to make weight on Saturday. I remember going to bed Thursday night and I'm like, this is not good. Like I have a lot of weight to lose tomorrow. I was like, guess I'll figure it out. But it ended up falling off pretty quickly. Honestly, the hardest cut I ever did, I started at 205 to 181, so not nearly as much in terms of poundages, but I had done 2 back-to-back cuts. So I did it was the one for the US Open, would have been in the end of April, beginning of May. And then 6 weeks later, I tried to do it again for a local. And that one, I almost missed weight. That was terrible. That was terrible. But other than that, they haven't been too bad.
What kind of advice, Ben, would you give people listening going, water cuts, cool, I wouldn't mind giving it a go. And we would say, fucking don't. But what would be your advice for anyone like who's going, water cuts, that sounds good, let me try that out?
I think as long as if you have a 24-hour weigh-in and you're keeping it under, I have a more complicated formula that I would need a calculator for, but if you're keeping it basically under 7% of your target body weight and you have 24-hour weigh-in, probably okay. Not going to be fun, but you're not going to die, and you're probably going to perform pretty well. If you're 2-hour weight cut, then maybe 4%, maybe 5% of your target weight if you're pushing it. If you're thinking about more than that, you better have a damn good reason for it. So I've got a guy I'm coaching for the showdown, and we're going to do an aggressive one because there's a lot of money on the line. He's got a good shot at it. So that's if you're going for something like that, then maybe. But yeah, otherwise I don't think that it's worth it, because I did a lot of cuts just for records or personal satisfaction, and in hindsight those were all stupid cuts. The ones where I was doing it to win the show or win the meet, those were okay. So I think you gotta have a good goal in mind, and you gotta know that okay, this is pretty reasonable as well.
And so obviously, going on that actually, so what in terms of powerlifting, you're a go for the win rather than the records kind of guy?
I am always go for the win. And
Awesome.
the way I look at it is, you're always going to have it. If you're good enough to set that record, you're always going to have that chance to set the record. That's not going anywhere. But the meet, to me, the meets are a special opportunity. You know, they're an experience, and so you want to try and make the most of that.
Yeah, I feel like most people could benefit from being a bit more focused on big wins rather than records, because then we would have less feds.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like everyone's I crack up. I get a few like messages from people, and they're like, "Oh, I'm a I've got a national record in this or that, or I've got a world record in this," and I'm like, okay, it's some anagram, like some some ABC da da da. I've got a world record, and I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's like the junior, deadlift only, a specific federation, and when the mood is full, I have this record.
Yeah, when the moon's full and the tides are out, like it gets a bit like that.
Yeah. Ben, what comps do you want to hit in your powerlifting career? In the future.
The only one. I'm really excited about the Pioneer Open. Pioneer is my big sponsor, and I'm really grateful to them. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. But I want to get to Big Dogs at one point. I was supposed to go last year, and then obviously with COVID, that didn't happen. So I hope that at some point I can get over there and do that show, because it looks really, really cool. And I've heard that the shows are just amazing. So I would like to be able to do that one. Unless Showdown adds a wrap division, I ain't doing it, because I love my knee wraps. I don't have any plans to keep sleeves.
And then so Showdown's raw only, yeah.
Wow.
Showdown is sleeves only. Yep.
Is it still a 24-hour weigh-in?
Yes.
Okay, so 24-hour weigh-in, but sleeves only.
Yeah. Does the Showdown's USPA, isn't it? Is it USPA? Yes. It's USPA, mate. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they differentiate that though. Yeah.
So Ben is like Joe Sullivan's like nemesis, because he loves sleeves. He fucking hates wraps.
No, we go back and forth a little bit. It's fun. Joe's a better squad than me, so I tend to lose that fight, but that's okay.
He came to knee wraps and he tore his calf. So
yeah, well, I think Joe will admit that was a last-minute decision for him to do the Kern, and he didn't have enough time to peak for that. So I'm sure that under better circumstances, he would not have ramped up so quickly. But he does seem to be healing up. He had that 700 squat a couple days ago that looked good. So
that was Bearnese too.
I'm sorry.
That was Bearnese.
Oh yeah.
That's disgusting. That's like a brand of its own,
Joe is a tough son of a bitch, man. It's cool. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. So obviously, big dogs would be dope. How heavy would you get for big dogs though? Because it's no weight class.
Yeah. So I would try to find that sweet spot. Okay, how big can I get and still be able to have a decent pull? Because at some point, like you said, hands are going to swell up. You're not going to be able to get your hips down. And I think that for my total, because I don't have like a standout lift, I'm going to have to be pretty balanced. So just try to find that trade-off, and then whenever I come in. Ideally, there would be one of those lighter weight classes. I want to say what was Warriors was like 100 kilos or 110 kilos, something like that.
Oh, he's doing a 115 kilo class.
115,
Warriors.
Yeah,
115.
That would be perfect for me, right?
Yeah.
So ideally something like that, because these super heavy guys are big. They're big dudes. So
yeah. I know that they're doing a Warriors, like a 115 in November, because they've just opened up, and they're doing a sort of because usually Pro Raw is at the Arnold's, which is their weight division competition,
right?
And then Big Dogs is a standalone. But so now they're running a thing. I think it's called Fit Expo or something. Greg, have you followed that?
Is this Marcus?
Yeah, Tony Doherty is running it's called Fit Expo or something, or whatever it is. But Marcos is then running Warriors at it, which is the 115.
No, I didn't know about that. No. Okay.
So they're sort of combining the two, I think. So they're doing that this year. So you could definitely have a go for it next year if the world actually opens up.
Hope so.
That'd be good. Yeah, man, that'd be sick. Actually, also that just reminded me, Ben has I would say the best facials on Instagram. when he's lifting, I watched I can't remember which video it was. Is it a True Squat machine?
Yes.
Oh, I saw that. That looked
That-
epic.
Dude,
that looks like a cool machine.
did you look at Ben's face when he's doing that squat?
I was looking at the damn legs. They're fucking huge. But yeah.
It is like one of my favorite videos of
Yeah.
Ben's because he goes through it's like an emotional roller coaster.
They look like an emotional.
Oh, that's how that set felt, man. Because that was supposed to be a warm-up set, right? So my training partner Taylor, he's like, "So you want me to spot you on the set or whatever?" I'm like, "No, I gotta have your one."
It's a machine, man. Come on. Yeah.
So it was supposed to be like 10 reps or something, right? It was like an intro, because it's bodybuilding, so you're building up high rep sets. So I get to set, I think I get to rep 8 or whatever, and I'm like, "There's no fucking way I'm doing another set of this." So I'm like, "Yeah, give me a couple more. I'm just done. Just get it over with." It was because it's a very cool machine where the strength curve is like perfect, right? Out of the hole, just as hard as at the top. And I wasn't expecting that because I'd never used it before. So, and the warm-ups, they felt heavy. So I did, with 3 plates felt heavy. So I put 4 plates on. I was like, okay, hopefully I can get a good 6 to 8 here, and then I'll drop back down 3 plates and rep out. And I get to rep 5, and I'm like, this is really hard, but it's not getting heavier. It's just hard. And I get to rep 8, and I'm like, okay, this is not good. Like, this is not going to be good. And then by rep 10, I'm like, all right, I'm done. Let's finish this set, and then we can just stop. I think I did like 2 sets of leg extensions after that. And that was the whole workout. But yeah, a lot of times you know how sometimes you're eating and your eyes are bigger than your stomach? That's how it is for me in the gym. It's like, oh, doesn't look that heavy. Let's just see what we can do. And then halfway through the set, it's like, oh, this was a mistake.
Yeah, the surprise on the face halfway through the set. Oh, okay, there's still like 3 reps to go. This is shit.
So Ben, from a coaching point of view, you've got plenty going on.
Yeah, I'm actually, one of my goals is to get better at that and managing my roster of athletes, I guess, because right now I just work on an individual basis, and I would like to be able to work with more lifters, but I don't have everything I do is by email. Everything is kind of one-on-one. And I think that if I had, I don't want to do cookie cutter programs or anything, but again, you look at a guy like Matt Jansen, or a guy like Bryce Lewis, these guys who have very successful coaching businesses. And even though they're treating all their athletes individually and they're, doing the best for them, they still have a very coherent flow to and structure to the way they coach. And so that's something that I'm trying to develop because A, I think that will make me a better lifter. B, it sounds like a lot of fun. And C, I think I'll be able to help more people that way. So that's the goal. That's what I'm trying to figure out how to do. And I think part of that is going to come up with kind of like a movement library, because one of my big things is movement selection. I think that's something that powerlifting coaches don't touch on quite as much. Usually when it gets to accessories, they're like, okay, do a few sets of lateral raises for girls or something. And I do believe that if you can structure all of your movements very appropriately to your goals, it can be very beneficial. So that's one thing I want to do. Yeah, for right now, it's very, very completely individual. So I have a lot of different guys with a lot of different goals that I'm working with, and they're all a lot of fun, but it's very, very varied. So I don't know. I'd like to have a more defined niche for myself in the strength coaching world.
Yeah. I think it's important to define that because the coaching market, powerlifting, is saturated.
Oh yeah, definitely. What's not is the training market in bodybuilding. It's crazy to me how many bodybuilders will take just kind of cookie cutter program, whether it's from John Meadows, and his programs are well designed, but if you want to be a top bodybuilder, you need something that's designed for you, right? Not something that's designed for the general public. So I do think there's an opportunity there that hopefully I get some more practice with diet, working on diets with people other than myself. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of fill that space.
Yeah, I think you definitely, we touched on it earlier in the podcast, was that niche market between that, finding that perfect balance between powerlifting and bodybuilding, because I think so many powerlifters would just jump at the chance, to have that, physique level, stage ready physique, but also have the strength ready enough to win competitions too.
Yeah.
I feel like we'll see more, so how we were saying about how powerlifting's a young sport, from the, when do we say 50s, when it sort of started. I feel like obviously raw lifting as such, so just wraps or sleeves, I mean, that's 8 years old, or say 10, stretch it to 10, say it's a decade old. And Whereas in the suits and stuff, you could get away with not being jacked as such. You know what I mean? You could get away with little weak links and stuff, whereas you can't do that now. So I think we'll see more and more people come out, like obviously maybe not to the extent of yourself or Dan Green, etc., but I think more and more of those types of people will come out of the woodworks, if that makes sense. How obviously we've had Stan and now you aiming for the same thing. I think you might end up seeing that, if you understand, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. I hope you're right. The other thing that I've heard is that, okay, people are going to learn how they can, they're going to develop this raw strengthening to the point where it's like they learn that if they can transfer that over to a suit and do better than the equipped guys ever have, maybe equipped lifting is going to catch back up. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of equipped lifting. It's not as fun and exciting to me to watch. So I hope you're right, but it'll be interesting to see because raw lifting is definitely a very, very young sport, like a decade tops, and there's a lot of room for it to grow, and it seems to be getting more and more popular, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's quite evident when you look at the all-time records and how quickly and how young some of those records are, and some of them are just literally changing from sometimes twice a year in some of those classes. Yeah,
they're just getting thrown around, those records. I did enjoy at the US Open. They had Christy Hawkins reffing Hunter for a squat, and then it was her record. It was her record that she was taking.
Oh wow!
So you almost cry every time you push the white light. Oh, okay, yep, all right, you can have it.
Yeah, well, I guess Hunter's getting trained by Matt Jensen now, so maybe Christy will start getting some dietary advice from Matt Jensen too.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's how it starts, eh? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, before we go, do you want to how do we find you, or how do people find you on the social media and the interwebs?
Instagram's probably best. PH Deadlift is my Instagram name, and the website's phdeadlift.com. And then you can email me, Ben at phdeadlift.com. I try to keep it simple because otherwise I forget.
Yeah.
Just say it's branding.
Yeah.
So shameless plugs, sponsors, etc.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Elite FTS and Pioneer and True Nutrition are my sponsors. I'm really grateful for them. Matt from Pioneer is a good personal friend, and then True Nutrition and Elite were the companies that I followed when I was just starting out. And so it's so cool for me to be, 10 years later being like, oh, I'm sponsored by them now. I'm really grateful for that. So
who's the man? So tip of my tongue, the man behind True Nutrition?
Dante Trudeau.
Dante, yeah.
Dante, dog crap.
Dog crap workout, yeah. I remember that from listening to the Geared Up podcast many years ago. Actually, True Nutrition.
Yeah.
Was one of their key sponsors as well. I'm thinking that sounds really familiar. That's awesome. I'm glad to see you still around too, because he posts up a ton of good stuff over the years too.
He does, yeah. He's a very smart dude.
Yeah, there's a few leading figures in the kind of power building, powerlifting, bodybuilding market that just keep churning out, great stuff all the time. And Ben, you're one of them too. I had a look at some of the articles.
Oh, thank you.
You put up, and literally the scroll bar was like this small. And I'm thinking, geez, Ben's.
Sometimes I think of smart things, and when I do, I try to write them down and make sure I make a video. So my next one is comparing vascularity to a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I gotta make that make sense somehow.
Excellent, Ben. Well, it's been a real pleasure, man, having you on the podcast. All the best for the Pioneer Comp coming up and the powerlifting as well. And for everyone out there, go and look up Ben and all his social media and all his articles on the FTS and so forth. Barbend as well. Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it, man.
Chat to you.